keep it alive through these lines I write. I keep it live cause I thrive. I might just blow your mind tonight. I'm so hyped, but it's no hype. From this height, it's direct hits on sight. I'm your type, lend me your ears to show you that there's something in me. I'm not giving up, I'm standing right here, holding these days hostage, and I'll make this my year. We turning fear into love, and the love's in the air. I love doing this cause nothing compares, nothing can share that same type of feeling when you feeling them flares. They can't catch it, it's havoc. I rip to a tear, switch a scenario, my stereos, I leave them impaired. Variables start to change and they're all in my range. I just gotta grab it, it's all mathematics. Every step is drastic, I make it fantastic. I'm trying to take your breath away, asthmatic.
This is live through the stereo. Go and let it blow, blow through the stereo. I'ma let them know through the stereo. Yo, here we go through the stereo, stereo. This is live through the stereo. Go and let it blow, blow through the stereo. I'ma let them know through the stereo. Yo, here we go through the stereo, stereo.
Yeah, just nod your head with it, so explicit and vivid. Every image is intricate, intimate. I put my all into it, no scrimmage and no rules. I'm a pro tool, hear my heartbeat, beat into the vocals. I'm so loco, lost my mind, oh no. It's ponderoso, dope, so no overdose, cause it's dope, yo. Man, this is house grown, mixed with some milestones. So I let the style flow down like the Dow Jones, bringing it with some foul tones, letting the crowd know we getting loud, so it's eardrum rudiments. Yeah, we bring it rude again. Move, little hooligan. Music for tuning in, full time to the 10. I'm on my clock like I told you. I'm doing this for dreams.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Anti-Media Radio Show. Once again with your host Nick Bernabe here on UCY.tv. Thank you all for coming back and joining us again. Monday night we had a great show with some people from antiwar.com, and we got to go into some geopolitics, and we're going to get right back into that stuff once again here tonight. As usual, we're always covering this geopolitical stuff because there's just so much to go over, and it's such a big topic, and it affects our lives so much because all these wars going on overseas, you know, we don't really see what's going on because the media doesn't really cover it very much. But it's, you know, first off, I mean, at the most superficial standpoint, it's robbing our money from us. And then secondarily, we got to be concerned about all these people dying, and there's been well over 1 million people dead at the hands of U.S. policies since 9/11 in the Middle East, Muslims alone, and so that's a huge problem. But anyway, we're going to have some special guests tonight. If you want to check out the show from last week, we talk a lot about Syria, Russia, and everything going on with ISIS and the whole battle for all that stuff going on. I'm going to get briefly into that tonight as well. If you want to join the show, you can call us at 718-717-8296. We're not going to be taking any calls until we get past our first couple of scheduled guests that are going to be joining us. So we're going to get into that first, and then if you want to call us later on, you can feel free to do that. Once again, if you do call in, make sure you don't have the radio playing in the background, otherwise it'll give us feedback and we'll have to hang up on you. And of course, we don't want to do that. Check us out 5 days a week, the Anti-Media Radio. I'm here Monday and Wednesday with my awesome panel of co-hosts, and then SM Gibson along with Shannon. They're on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and Levon is on Fridays. If you want to hear more about like solution-based oriented topics, make sure you tune in Friday, because I know we're always railing against the empire and the police state and all these crooked politicians. If you're tired of hearing about all that, make sure you tune in Fridays, because Levon talks about a bunch of other awesome like solution-oriented stuff. So we do have a great variety, and it's at the same time, 8 o'clock Pacific time, 11 p.m. Eastern. Anyway, without further ado, first let me introduce our panel, and then we have a special guest that's going to provide us with some awesome content. But DB, how you doing, man?
Hey, I'm doing good, Nick.
Awesome. Glad to have you on, man, and glad that you're joining us from Minnesota. Jake, what's up, bro?
Not much. Just made a terrible mistake, Nick. I avoided it all day, but finally I gave in. I got into a gun control debate on Facebook, and I'm reeling from it.
Love it or leave it.
Yeah.
You know, gun control is one of those issues where people have pretty strongly held opinions on it. Most people
Yeah.
do. And no matter how many facts or how many anything you present, people aren't really going to leave their camps, and it's one of those issues that I think anyone that's trying to spread somewhat of any kind of like unification message is going to have problems with, because
Right.
it's always going to be one of those very, very divisive issues, just like abortion and a bunch of other things that go on.
Absolutely.
And of course, I mean, I've aired my opinions on guns before, I don't want to get into it tonight, obviously.
No. I was sort of being facetious. I certainly don't want us to get into that discussion tonight. And for the record, I think everyone should own at least 100 assault rifles. Let me just throw that out.
Good RPGs too,
Yeah, and tanks and everything.
Yeah.
No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
Anyway,
sorry.
so we have a special treat for everyone tonight. As promised, we said we were going to have him back on, but we have Randall Byers joining us tonight. How you doing, Randall?
What's up, my brother? How are you?
Oh, we're doing really well. Randall, you joined us a few months ago with some awesome spoken word. I guess you call it poetry, right?
Something like that.
And man, we were blown away by what you presented to us in studio. So I wanted to invite you on tonight to give us another taste of some of your work, man. So so feel free to let loose.
All right. So this I finished up just a couple months ago. It goes, it's time to rise up with fists to admire and teach these politicians what should happen to liars. They treat our lives like a little kid playing the game Risk, and soon we'll be dropping bombs while catching fish. This is not our reality yet, but it will be if we become a social government. So please never forget our country's roots. Even though back in the day the president wore worker boots, and nowadays all they do is flaunt around in their $1,000 suits. The times have changed and we've adjusted. The things that seemed so important after time got old and rusted. But still, money is the most lusted. It sadly runs our economy instead of hard work and honesty. And even freedom has a fee. It's time to express disbelief while all these politicians are lying through their teeth while standing on a pedestal being told to preach. The way they analyze civilian laws but still somehow ignore the hunger cries, we must work together if we want to make this better. We must overcome the slum, and once we do, only good things are to come. It's time for the people to get the majority sum, and once again the citizens will dictate what should be done. It's time to take back our rights with a bitter conviction and a new source of might. How could good seem so out of sight? Probably because it's been a while since we as a nation have stood up to fight for every American right. So stand tall with me to help this country expose the potential it offers being a democracy. And I know someday we will look back and see how we as a generation changed and took care of the needs to enable us to be truly the country of the free, or what I like to consider the land of opportunity. If not now, someday the whole world will see that our government is the purpose of most of our catastrophes. And unless things change, well, at least we've made this grave as our final resting place, where integrity and grace cannot be found on one face. The earth will get back to a place where it's no longer affected by human toxic waste. So I just finished that one up, and I've definitely got one more that I can share with you guys real quick.
Dude, that was amazing, man.
Yeah, this one, yeah, they're definitely quite the rants.
All right, go for it, man. Let the next one rip.
So this one goes, once we learn how to embrace all of the human race, everyone in this interplanetary space will have a common meeting place, where it doesn't matter the color of your face, but what you store in your knowledge base. So just in case you feel complacent, well, we must all face it. To get through these trials and tribulations, it takes a lot of patience and human relations. If you're going on rations because you always lacked in passion and your opinion changed as fast as fashion, well, keep relaxing because you couldn't handle the action. It's a malfunction of human dysfunction that has left so many reluctant that they refuse to function. The next generation, where they see more manipulation and contraband dictating, or will they find a way to live beyond these means of selfish and destructive things, Would they adapt to their desires, or would they burn in fires? I present questions because without them, we'll never learn life's lesson. And if I had to stand and give a confession, it would just be one big blessing for those that never left and held on that one last breath, fighting not for desire, but to inspire truth and justice that can't be fucked with. But could you please explain to me how so many people only exist to be remembered as a fallen casualty? The complexity of our reality seems fade at this rate. But when we learn how to love and not hate, our potential, man, that shit's incredibly great. And I just finished that one up. Yeah.
Awesome, man. Dude, once again, I'm blown away by your work, man, and it's just really refreshing to see some artists out there like really speaking truth to power.
I just am trying to get it out there. That's all I do it for.
Cool, man. So once again, that's Randall Byers. Randall, do you have a place where people can find a little more of your work?
Yeah, if you look me up on Facebook, it's just Randall Byers, and my profile is all decked out in Adult Swim stuff, so it's pretty easy to find.
Awesome.
But yeah, find me on there, and then just go through my notes. And on all my notes, I have tons of them on there. I have about 42. So there's a lot.
Cool, man. Well, we're gonna have you back on in a few months. Hopefully, I'll give you a call again, and then we'll have you back on, and hopefully in studio, maybe you and Alex can come down here. We could talk talk all night about some stuff here on the air.
That sounds quite wonderful, my brother, and I'll talk to you soon. And you guys have a wonderful show, and I'll be listening.
All right, man. Peace.
All right, peace, brother.
Cool, man. So I'm glad Randall joined us. He was with us a few months ago, and I really like the stuff that he does, and it's really cool to see him live. He came down for our million like party too, when the Anti-Media hit 1 million likes, and he was spitting for us out on the patio, and everyone was out there hanging out and stuff, and that was really cool. But it's time to get into some of this news because there's some really hard-hitting stuff that's been developing. We briefly went over it on Monday regarding the hospital that was attacked in Afghanistan. It was operated by the French affiliate of Doctors Without Borders, which is an awesome charity that goes out and just helps people all over the place. You know, they went to Africa and helped people that had Ebola. They're in all these war zones helping people, and they don't discriminate against anyone. Anyone that's injured can come and get help at this hospital, which may be partially why this thing got bombed. Of course, that's still yet to be found out. There's plenty of speculation going around. One of our awesome journalists at the Anti-Media has been keeping a really close eye on what's going on with this hospital bombing. Once again, it's over in Kunduz, Afghanistan. But we're joined by Claire Bernish on the line tonight. How you doing, Claire?
I'm good. How are you?
Oh, doing really well. Relatively speaking, dealing with my American privilege, so to speak. I was, walking our office dog earlier today down to the store, and I was just walking the dog, and I was just thinking, man, it's nice to be able to walk outside without worrying about a bomb being dropped right on my head. You know what I mean?
So far.
For now, and it really is a frightening prospect. And this is exactly what went on in Afghanistan on Saturday. We covered it right away once it came out. And, I wrote the first story on it, but you've been on top of it ever since. And, first of all, I just want to point out the hypocrisy here, because on Friday, Obama was on live TV, and it was broadcast on every single channel. I mean, this is propaganda. They wanted it to get to everybody. It was on CNN. It was on NBC. It was on Fox. Everyone was broadcasting his conference live, and he was sitting there condemning Russia because he said Russia is hitting civilian people over in Syria in their airstrikes. And I'm not disputing that. I'm not saying Russia hasn't hit civilians. In fact, it's pretty much impossible not to hit civilians when you're bombing countries. There's always going to be civilians in the way. But then the following day, just a few hours later, we go and drop a bomb right on top of a hospital, and not just one bomb. We kept bombing it for over 30 minutes. So, Claire, you've been following this story. Can you give us a little update? Because there's just so many different things going on. The story has changed so many times. I mean, what can you tell us?
Okay, well, first of all, the Médecins Sans Frontières, which is MSF, the Doctors Without Borders, they have the official story about the bombing has changed at least 4 times. It started with Saturday's initial report. They said that basically they didn't know if the U.S. did not know if it had actually hit the hospital or not. They said that, there was stuff going on in the area, but they didn't even know if they'd hit the hospital. And then a day later, they said that a strike had occurred in the vicinity of the hospital, so it's possible the hospital was hit on accident. And then the day after that, they changed the story again and said that their troops in the area had not faced a threat themselves, but they had been called in to assist the Afghan troops that were in the area to make to actually do the bombardment. And then finally, they said that U.S. forces had been called in and had carried out the strike at the behest of Afghan forces. So the thing that we have here is that the bombing lasted, first of all, there are differing reports, but it said that the bombing lasted from a half hour to an hour before the people in the hospital were able to actually contact the forces and say, hey, you're hitting a hospital. Once they did that, the bombing continued for at least half an hour afterwards. There's so many problems with this, including the MSF staff constantly informed all of the fighting parties in the area the exact GPS coordinates of all the buildings on the hospital compound property, so they knew those figures anyway. And then also there was now a raid that occurred by Afghan troops about 3 months before the bombardment actually happened. And so Afghan troops, and therefore the U.S., knew the coordinates even from the raid, and knew that if the Afghan forces were calling us in to bomb the hospital, they knew it was a hospital. So...
Got it. I mean, it's just sickening to hear this. I mean, it's I would say it's unbelievable, but it's not, because we cover this stuff all the time, and this kind of thing goes on all the time. In fact, this isn't the first time they've bombed a hospital. One of our awesome contributors, Dan Sanchez, posted an article. I think we posted it either yesterday or the day before. About how Obama is a Nobel Peace Prize winner, and he went and of course Obama isn't exactly the one that launched this attack, but he's the commander in chief, and of course he takes credit when he kills Bin Laden, and when he does all these other things. But when things like this happen, it's not Obama's fault and stuff. But no, he's the commander in chief. Ultimately, he's the guy that's supposed to be held accountable for this stuff.
He authorized the attack.
I mean, I wouldn't doubt it. I wouldn't doubt if he did.
No, he did. That's what no one besides the president can authorize a bombing.
All right, man. Well, there you go. So there's a good chance that Obama did authorize this, and so I mean, it's just it's really sad to see. But here's the thing that's even crazier. Obama's not the first American Nobel Peace Prize winner to bomb a Nobel Peace Prize winner, because keep in mind, Doctors Without Borders won a Nobel Peace Prize back in I think it was 99. In 99, Doctors Without Borders won the Nobel Peace Prize for a lot of the work that they've been doing around the world, help in war zones and helping people that are injured. And so they got it, and then 10 years later, Obama wins the Nobel Peace Prize in 2009, basically before he even became active in the presidency, which that itself is kind of, it had me baffled for a long time, especially after seeing his actions once he took office. Recently, one of the people that was part of the committee on the Nobel Peace Prize that helped give Obama that prize actually voiced his regret about awarding it to him, because they felt that it would have helped him. They felt like giving him the prize was going to encourage him to be a more peaceful president. Now, we all know that isn't exactly the case. There was a bunch of memes going around the internet over the last several days claiming that, congratulations, Obama, the first Nobel Peace Prize winner to bomb a Nobel Peace Prize winner. Well, that's not exactly the case, because it turns out Henry Kissinger, who is also an American, who also won the Peace Prize, as crazy as that sounds, because we all know Kissinger is like a genocidal maniac. Kissinger also helped orchestrate a bombing of a hospital, which turned out to be a Red Cross hospital, which the Red Cross has won 3 Nobel Peace Prizes. So Obama's not the first American Peace Prize winner to do that. He's as far as we know, he's the second one. But this just goes to show you what kind of this crazy hypocritical policy that the U.S. maintains. Now, keep in mind, this Kissinger thing happened back during the Nixon administration. So it was a long time ago, and maybe it did skip a few people's, research when they were making these memes and stuff. But the meme itself, I understand the meme, and it went viral, and, it makes sense. But, this isn't the first time it's happened, and so now we're starting to see a story that we covered here on the Anti-Media is that the MSF is now they're literally calling for war crime investigations. Claire, what can you tell us about this? Was this bombing a war crime, or what do you think it is?
In my opinion, this bombing was absolutely a war crime because either the U.S. is guilty of knowingly bombing the hospital because the coordinates were known to them, or they're guilty of neglect and not thoroughly checking the coordinates that they were supposed to be bombing. So either way you look at it, to me, at least, this is definitely a war crime. And then MSF is going to be, they've called on the signatories for the Geneva Conventions to actually convene this never-before-convened, supposedly, what is it called, this council, to do an inquiry and an investigation into the bombing, basically to discover if it was, in fact, a war crime. And like I'm saying, and like a lot of countries around the world and a lot of kind of bigger figures are actually really saying, this is a war crime. There's not really going to be an escape for the U.S. this time. So it should be interesting to see what this committee comes up with. Even the counsel for MSF has said that they would be pursuing all of their investigation as if this were already considered a war crime. So
one thing to mention too is that I was just doing some of my own research. There was a report I've read that said that they were maybe zeroing in on a stolen Humvee that had one of these GPS chips in it, and the Taliban were kind of parked underneath, and they were trying to hit it with a bunker buster, which would explain why there's a massive fireball.
There were also reports, though, from doctors on the scene in the hospital. I guess both the Afghan forces and the U.S. have said that there were fighters like right next to the hospital or even inside the hospital firing out from there. But people who were on the scene at the time from MSF have disputed that. So I'm not really sure how valid that claim could be.
Yeah, and the MSF, Doctors Without Borders, they're not interested in really pointing fingers, right? It's a very neutral organization. All they do is care about helping people that are hurt or injured. They're not out here trying to spread rumors or anything like that. And so I take most of what they say pretty legitimately. And if you look at the tweets, because they've been firing off a bunch of tweets, both the MSF and people that are affiliated with the MSF, and they're really, really critical about what's going on. In fact, they're the ones asserting that this was a war crime, and I think the commission you were talking about, Claire, was the International Fact-Finding Commission that was part of the Geneva Convention. The president of MSF, Joanne Liu, had a statement, and she said, "It is unacceptable that the bombing of a hospital and the killing of staff and patients can be dismissed as collateral damage or brushed aside as a mistake. This was not just an attack on our hospital, it was an attack on the Geneva Conventions. This cannot be tolerated. If we let this go and we are not, and if it were a non-event, we are basically giving a blank check to any country involved in an armed conflict. It's about being able to care for populations in conflict areas." So basically, this is what she's saying. She's like, I don't care if it would have been Russia. I don't care if it would have been the Taliban. I don't care if it would have been the Afghan government or any other actor out there, Saudi Arabia, you name it. But, we just want to have justice for this, and Obama basically released a statement saying, hey, we're sorry about this, but I don't know if an apology is enough to, make up for a war crime. I mean, if anyone else did this, our media would be like rabid wolves going after them. And, Glenn Greenwald documented very clearly about how the media is treating this situation, and not all the media, but in particular CNN and the New York Times, basically in most of their reporting to date, have been basically muddling the language and not actually being clear about it being a U.S. airstrike when we already all know that that's what happened. Now, the New York Times and CNN has been just saying, oh, an airstrike hit a hospital, and they're not saying who did it, and so the media is showing its hypocritical face once again. And to me, it's just so clear why it's so important to support independent media, especially in this case, because we're able to be the watchdogs over what's going on. And if we keep on pushing this thing, I mean, at the very least, we can get some kind of accountability. I don't think the U.S. is going to actually be charged with a war crime. I don't know when the last time the U.S. was charged with a war crime, if ever. Despite all the horrendous things that we've done all around the world so many times over, I don't know if they'll ever be charged because, let's face it, the U.S. is kind of one of the founding members of the Geneva Convention, and they're head of the UN. And, the UN is based in New York City, you know what I mean? And so it's going to be really hard to get any kind of international organization that the U.S. is part of to condemn it because we are one of the main, stakeholders in most of these organizations.
It's going to be really hard for the U.S. to get out of this one, to wriggle out of this one, I think. I mean, no matter how you look at it, this amounts to a war crime. I mean, either they knew the coordinates and did it anyway, they were told about the coordinates and continued to bomb. Really, there is no excuse. And, the U.S. did it. Everybody saw the U.S. do it. And, I mean, to imagine them getting out of this would this could be a real flashpoint for a lot of things.
Yeah, and I think it's going to really help us undermine a lot of this empire building that's going on overseas. I mean, I don't know how credible the reports are, but we have a report on the anti-media from a Russian outlet, and the Syrian ambassador to Russia claims that in 1 week, Russia has degraded 40% of ISIS's infrastructure inside of Syria. Now, of course, keep in mind this is coming from the Syrian government, and it's going to be biased, and it's coming from a Russian outlet. But at the same time, all of the stuff that's going on right now, and it really seems like it's coming up. I don't know if it's a boiling point. I don't know if we're coming up to a turning point here. I can't really tell. But what I can tell for sure is that the U.S. narrative, again, regarding their involvement in Syria and Iraq right now, is falling apart at the seams. I mean, go ahead.
You have to wonder whether this was not a move on Russia's part to, pull the rug out from under our moves in the Middle East and kind of expose what we're doing. I mean, it's really hard for me to not see it in that respect.
I see the same thing, actually.
Yeah, I mean it's hard to dispute. Now, keep in mind, I'm not trying to say that we created ISIS. Okay, I'm not trying to say that the CIA is in control of ISIS, but there's no really disputing the fact that our policies, especially in the overthrow of Saddam Hussein, created a vacuum for ISIS to thrive. ISIS, according to one of our journalists, Justin King, who is a former, I don't even know, man. I think he was a special ops. His analysis of this is basically saying, ISIS is a convenient product of U.S. foreign policy that can be easily used to destabilize Assad, which is something that the U.S. has been trying to do for a very long time. Long before the Arab Spring, we've been trying to overthrow the government of Syria. And so, according to a lot of people's analysis of the situation, we're not really trying to contain ISIS inside of Syria. We're not that worried about them. We are trying to contain them in Iraq, but we're not trying to contain them as much in Syria because at the moment they're acting as the biggest destabilizing agents against the Assad government. You know what I mean? And this is exactly why Russia has stepped into this mess and has now come out in the open with their military action over there, because Russia and Assad, Russia and the Syrian government have been longtime allies. Russia maintains a naval base inside of Syria, and they have a lot of economic dealings together. The other thing that we've covered recently was the pipeline factor going on over there, and we had Manar Muawesh on the show from Mint Press News recently to talk about that in depth. But there's a major geopolitical oil pipeline game that's going on right now over there in the Syrian region. That there's two parties that are competing for the pipelines. You got our allies, which is Saudi Arabia, Qatar, the UAE, the United Arab Emirates, and the other Sunni Gulf states that are trying to build a pipeline that's going to take oil from the Gulf into Europe, which would basically cut Russia out of Europe, because right now Russia is the main supplier of the natural resources for Europe. And then you have the other competing pipeline, which is coming from Iran. And that one, as we covered in our last show on Monday, that's pretty much, that deal has been scrapped. So the main thing it comes down to is, are we geopolitically trying to cut Russia out of Europe by destabilizing the Syrian government, building a pipeline through Syria? Because keep in mind, Assad has said he's not going to allow this pipeline to be built. And so he said, no, it's not going to happen. And this is exactly why Russia backs up Assad, because Russia right now has somewhat of a monopoly on European gas supplies and all that stuff. And they, of course, want to maintain that monopoly. So they want to keep Assad in power because Assad's not letting the pipeline be built. And now, are these are these deals shady? Yeah. Is Russia being shady about this? Are they supporting a dictator to keep their monopoly on gas? Yes. But is it our role, is it the U.S.'s role in the world to go and overthrow governments just so that our allies can build pipelines? I say no. What do you guys think? DB, what's up, man? You there?
Yeah, man. I mean, I don't know what we can say that hasn't already.
Were we
been,
having a moment of silence there for a second?
I think so. We're having
crisis.
We're having a moment of silence, man. I mean, people just perish, dude. But yeah, man. I don't know what needs to be said that we haven't already said. I mean, ISIS is an offshoot of the Mujahideen. I mean, that's obvious. We funded them back in the 80s. They've sprung into this. We're still paying them. We're using proxies like imams in the Middle East to pay them. We're buying them Toyota trucks. We're not bombing them. Russia just completely obliterates them in like 7 days, knocks out like 50% of their infrastructure. So, yeah, man, they're useful fools, dude. And the problem is that they're very vicious. I mean, vicious in a way that we haven't seen since the Middle Ages. And you can't control guys like that. So we're going to have to clean that mess up one way or another, unless the goal is to destabilize the whole world for nefarious purposes that we really don't want to get into in this show. I mean, that would take a whole nother show.
Yeah.
So much going on. Claire, before we let you go, I want to ask you one other question. Because this one, I'm actually writing an article on this. It'll be out tomorrow. It was going to be short, but now it's 4 pages long. But out of all the presidential candidates that are out there, there's only been one to condemn this bombing of the Afghan hospital. And to me, it really shows that basically every candidate out there, and I'm including Bernie Sanders in this, is more or less not going to touch this subject, because they're more or less not going to address foreign policy much at all. And in fact, if they are going to address it, especially on the Republican side of things, they're talking about amping it up, like, hey, let's do more over there. You know what I'm saying? Why do you think it is? I mean, why is it that Rand Paul is the only guy to actually come out and condemn this bombing, and every other candidate has been completely silent on it?
I think personally that I'm even surprised there's a single candidate that has come out against it. We're talking about the U.S. military-industrial complex that kind of rules the world and rules our economy and eats everything in its path. We don't have infrastructure in this country and a lot of other things that we really need because we're too busy feeding the war machine. And if somebody were to, say, speak their true feelings and be against the war instead of feeding the machine, then they'd be out of a job.
I mean, it's useful to point out that the military only has roughly 1% of our entire population, roughly about 3 million people in total work for them, and they get 55% of the budget. So when people talk about the 1%ers, there you go.
Yeah, man, great point. And that brings us back to the deep state, and we've been covering that topic a lot. Claire, thank you for calling in. I know that you said that you may only be able to stick around for a little while. If you want to stick around and continue the conversation, we're going to talk about some other stuff. Feel free if you got to go. We won't be offended.
Okay, well, I'm going to head out and maybe just, wanted to hint that I have a pretty big article coming up soon that might be on a subject people have kind of forgotten about.
Awesome. Well, that's good to hear. And
Jimmy Carter?
All right, good night.
See you later, Claire. So, given the fact that our last several shows we've had like a bunch of guests on and that we've been kind of just talking about singular subjects for the last few shows, I wanted to leave this show relatively open for discussion tonight. We're going to open the lines up for callers, 718-717-8296. If you want to join us, we're just going to have a unscripted conversation here regarding a lot of things that are going on. We're going to be pulling some news from the website and talking about that. First, I want to go over to Jake. I know you had a few things you want to talk about tonight. What's up, Jake?
I actually, my mind's all over the place, Nick. I guess one thing I could discuss that I've been discussing with my family, just because we watch a lot of news, and sometimes we watch CNN, MSNBC, and we see that. I see that, and I see MSNBC being the quote-unquote counter to Fox and whatnot. And I'm really into this idea right now of, I've been talking about it a lot. I've used the words controlled opposition on a number of different threads. It's kind of my go-to statement now, as well as the statement, the extremes the extremes inform the mean. And I'm very interested in this idea right now of a controlled dialogue, which I think is something that's been happening in this country for a while. And it keeps us on these kind of like middle ground issues that are divisive. And I guess what I'm saying is that there's a full spectrum of human thought we could be discussing, and yet we see these goal lines set on the right and on the left, Republican and Democrat, liberal, conservative, liberal. And those are the extremes. And then everything in the middle of that we see is what pop culture discusses and what we as citizens discuss. And I think we need to break out of that, and I think it's a very conscious effort on the part of our handlers, as I call them, to keep the dialogue controlled, what we can talk about, what we can't talk about, and even within each micro subject, every subreddit, so to speak, we see this controlled opposition, and I think that's one thing that's been on my mind. What do you guys think about that? Do you think there's a conscious effort on the part of the corporatocracy to keep us, within a very narrow spectrum of dialogue and discourse?
Absolutely. I think they control they're starting to infiltrate the alternative media. I mean, we were kind of going over that today about how there's all these sites people believe are independent and cutting edge and go out and get stories, but really they're funded by these same global conglomerates. And I mean, if you really just look into it, I would say at least 90% of alternative media sites have a corporate parent. So when you have a Vice is one of them. I mean, even political movements are funded by billionaires. So you have to look into that. Popular political movements, I don't need to name them. You can research yourself. When they take money from people like Soros, they lose legitimacy, yet people buy into their bullshit, and they're just divisionary.
Absolutely. Vice, what's their share, Nick? Vice that they took from Murdoch?
5% is owned by Murdoch.
Right, which seems relatively low, but then you look at something like National Geographic, which is now, I wrote an article.
It's majority owned by Fox.
Owned. Yeah, I even wrote an article about that. And I can't remember.
Remember, Fox is owned by Prince Al Waleed of Saudi Arabia, half and half with whatever that Australian douchebag's name is. So you have to understand, even our media is owned by foreign players.
Absolutely. And Nick, I don't want to put you on the spot, but just so our listeners out there know, Nick is Nick who he runs Anti-Media. He's personally promised me he will never sell part of anti-media to a corporate conglomerate. So I'm going to hold you to that, buddy.
No, man, I'm taking the pledge. I took a blood oath. I cut my wrist, and I made a deal with who, and no, I'm just kidding. Back to what you were saying, Jake. Noam Chomsky has a great quote on exactly what you were mentioning, and he says, "The smart way to keep people passive and obedient is to strictly limit the spectrum of acceptable opinion, but allow very lively debate within that spectrum." And that's a nice little short quote, but it's so damn true. And
yeah.
I was gonna invoke what you first talked about when you first came on the show, but I'm not. But it's very true, man. They give us a very, very small slice of where we can agree or disagree. They give us two sides to pick. You can pick one side or the other, and you can fight it out to the death over those two things. But in the end, while you guys are fighting over abortion or gay marriage or whatever the topic is, we're going to be dropping bombs over there in the Middle East, and we're going to be having a corporate global empire going on, and that's just kind of what they do. And so in the debates, if you flash back to 2012, you'll see that Ron Paul was out there trying to talk about foreign policy, and they shut him down. One of the debates that was over 2 hours long, they gave him 89 seconds to speak because they didn't want to hear that part of the debate. They want to say, look, here's the debate. Do we bomb Iran in 6 months, or do we bomb Iran in 6 years? Now fight, you know what I mean? And this is exactly the debate that they give us. And man, I couldn't be more in agreement with you. I made a status update about one thing I noticed today, which is this news outlet called, it's a video outlet called Now This.
Right.
And they make these cool little videos. And I'm not going to lie, I enjoy watching some of their videos when it's non-political and when it's just, cool little fluff stories about cool little things that they find on the internet. And that's fine. But what people need to know about Now This is that it's operated by MSNBC. And as we all know, MSNBC is the counterbalance to Fox, but in the end, they give us a little tiny spectrum to debate with, and in the end, MSNBC allows the politicians to lie about weapons of mass destruction in Iraq and allows us to go invade a country that has done nothing to the United States. You know what I'm saying? And so, now this is just like Vice in that way, where they're going to, act like, we're nice, we care about young people, we're all for Bernie Sanders and stuff, but when Bernie Sanders drops out of the race, well, guess who they're going to support? You know what I'm saying? So, I mean, this is something that I think is really important because there's so many news outlets out there. Of course, as DB mentioned, man, the independent, quote unquote, independent media is completely infiltrated with it as well. And even worse than that, you've also got a bunch of just disinformation out there, like just crazy disinformation. It looks like something that you'd see in a movie or something. I mean, I don't even want to name any names right now because I don't even want people giving them any traffic. But sites like Veterans Today and things like that, I mean, they just make shit up out of nowhere. Every now and then they'll throw some real stories out there, but...
Well, and rest assured, rest assured, there are hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars. I mean, this is actually documented. I mean, this is not a conspiracy theory. It's documented. I'm sure there's... we can invoke names of certain projects. Back in the day, it was there's Mockingbird and any number of projects in the past, and God knows what they're doing now. But we know that there are vastly intricate social media programs going on to infiltrate networks, groups, and whatnot, and put disinformation and misinformation out there. They took their recipe from. I mean, these days, I'm almost starting to think George Orwell did us a disservice. It's almost like he put out a rule book for the deep state. Obviously, I'm being facetious here, but they took George Orwell and did him 10 times over, and now we have. It's hard to even know who you're talking to on social media right now, and with all the sock puppets that are out there. Even a sci-fi writer I like named John Scalzi had a great tweet the other day where he was like, he was talking about sock puppets, and it was a great little tweet. I can't remember the exact nature of it now, but yeah, you gotta really vet everything these days in terms of who's putting information out there. And unfortunately, there's just the narrative is so strong, it's so entrenched that we need to be at war, that we need to be doing these things, that America is a certain way, the reality is a certain way, that we just most people can't break out of it. And I don't have the audacity to think that I've broken out of it, because I certainly have it. But I have broken out enough to know, to see, to glimpse the sparkling pixels of the Matrix. And I know that things are not right. And I hope other people out there who are listening agree with me that things are not right. And when things aren't right, you work to fix them. And one way we have to fix it right now is by calling out these groups that are putting disinformation out right now and feeding this broken machine that pretends like it's not broken.
Yeah, man, great point. Claire, the journalist that was just on with us, she's working on a story that's going to be out soon in collaboration with some other journalists that is really going to put together a list of some of the worst abusers of independent media, some of the worst disinformation outlets, and just people that are out there co-opting the messages out there that actually need to get out. So keep an eye out for that. Anyone out there listening that wants a little more, we're going to put it down on paper. There's a lot of websites that you may think are legit, man, but they're in many ways they're not. They do sometimes post good stories and here and there because they have to maintain somewhat of a reputation, but in the end, a lot of them are just disinformation. Jake, on that note, as far as doing something about what's going on, I want to bring up this story here that Kerry Wedler wrote on the Anti-Media on October 5th. Out of Germany, there's a big NSA base in Germany called the Dagger Complex. I'm sure many people have heard about it. It's basically the continental Europe's main data hub where the NSA spies on everyone in Europe, more or less, to keep them free, so they say. But anyway, there's some activists from a group called Intel Exit, and basically the entire organization is attempting to get people to defect from the intelligence agencies, whether we're talking about NSA, CIA, and all the other, GCHQ and all the other versions of it that every government out there has. These guys flew a drone over the top of the Dagger Complex, the NSA base, and they dropped leaflets on the base trying to appeal to some of the workers there to appeal to their conscience, to get them to quit. And did you guys hear about this?
It's one of the most brilliant things. Yeah, I saw it when you sent it to me even before Kerry. And yeah, I mean, it's pure brilliance. It's culture jamming at the highest level. It's beyond culture jamming. It's straight up an act of revolution, really. And God, I mean, tears almost came to my eyes when I saw that. And this is just the beginning, and we're just at the beginning of this meme information warfare. And one of the writers I respect so much, and I wrote about recently, Cory Doctorow. He wrote a book called Little Brother, and it's of course it's about everything that's going on right now. And of course, it's a direct play on words with George Orwell's Big Brother, and the basic idea being, which is we can use the tools that they are using to oppress us to turn it right back on them. So with Little Brother, they're spying on us. We can use these same tools to jam the system, to jam the cogs of the wheels, and to me, this is a perfect example of that.
Exactly.
And hacktivists can also group together under social consciousness, and let's blackmail these politicians back.
Great idea.
Turn their own tactics against them, man. I think that's a great idea. DB, what else can we do, man? What else can we do to encourage more whistleblowers? Because I think that's one thing that's really going to help tear down this fake control grid that they have set up for us. I mean, all this stuff. That all these things that they're doing, whether it's the NSA or the FBI creating terrorists, or the CIA or the foreign policy, a lot of it's designed to scare the shit out of us. And I think the whistleblowers can help break down these barriers and show us, look, they're not even stopping terrorists, just like Snowden showed us. Like, they haven't stopped anybody. They're just spying on everybody for no reason.
Right.
DB, what do you think we can do to encourage more people to rebel?
This is going to sound, taken it to the edge, but it's already been there for a long time. When a guy like Michael Hastings crashes his Mercedes into a tree at 110 and blows, people need physical security. They're not going to get it from the state apparatus. So, maybe it's overdue that we need to talk about militias being used to protect whistleblowers, to give them physical security, because that's the biggest problem, Nick. Anytime somebody has something pertinent with information and evidence, they're gone. They're gone before we hear about it, or maybe it's just a snippet of a rumor and then they're gone. So whatever we need to do as far as the Citizen Oversight Protection Committee to make whistleblowers have physical security, it's already at that point. So this is the next logical step. I only can hope that the military is 80 to 90% in our boat, and only the diehard officers who are invested in the USA Corp are the only guys that are kind of against the people. But I think it's coming to that. I mean, I remember, Nick, we talked 4 or 5 years ago about how you and me were talking about how the military is going to go against each other and the people are going to have to go against the government. I don't think that's going to happen now. I think the people, if they were to come out en masse, like in Brazil and countless other places, if we were just able to get off of this fluoride mind haze, would just come out, the military will clean up the mess for us.
DB, I agree with you. A couple quick points. I foresee a way of doing this that does not involve militias. I'm not opposed necessarily to militias. The problem is the very word is so stigmatized, it almost immediately causes ears to shut. I had a good friend of mine who was in the military. He straight up told me that most of the people he worked with in the military said, when shit hits the fan, when the chips are down, they're on the people's side, man. They're gonna turn against the government. They're not idiots. They know what's been done. They know how the tools of the state have been used to screw them, to send them into harm's way for illegitimate purposes, for the purposes of war crimes. And when shit hits the fan, they're gonna be on our side. Okay, that's one point. The second point is, yes, we probably will require militias at some point. However, I think before that, it's far more important for us to get involved on almost a neurological level. We have to be engaged with all of the people that are coming of age right now, and we have to make it cool to rebel. We have to make it fun to rebel. We have to make it the thing to do. What more do you have in your life besides forging your way in this world and making the world a better place? And do you really want to be had by these people? Do you really want a blindfold over you by these people that think that you're nothing but a consumer, that think that you're nothing but a little consumerist sheep? Is that really what you want to be? No, you want to rise up and do something. And that's why these tools of the little brother state that Cory Doctorow offers, jailbreak your PS3 into a tool that can spy on the government. Use your cell phone, jailbreak your devices so that you can listen to what the police are talking about. The possibilities are endless, but it's cool to rebel against the government. You don't need a militia to do that. Use their tools to make it unacceptable for them to do what they're doing.
Yeah, the way I see it is it's up to the millennials to pick up where the baby boomers kind of got lazy after everything happened in the 60s. They had all that momentum going, and then drugs and rock and roll derailed them. And now we have a million ways to entertain ourselves, but people are understanding that this is a hollow life right now. We don't have our own self-destiny anymore. And to take that back, it's going to actually require physically getting off of your ass and making the military take the trash out. That's the only way we can do this. If we don't do this, we have a slow crawl into tyranny and oppression, and every dystopian kind of book you've read will take place in one form or fashion if we just allow this slow creep to continue.
I call it the apocalypse drip, man.
Great points brought up, man. I think everyone's here hitting it right. One thing I want to bring up here, and back to the more basic levels here of just using social media and stuff without even having any technological know-how or anything. And this story comes from Saudi Arabia. Scott S.M. Gibson covered it just a few hours ago on the Anti-Media. Saudi Arabia announced that they are going to execute rumor mongers on Twitter and Facebook. So if they find people in Saudi Arabia spreading quote-unquote rumors about the government, literally your sentence could be an execution. And so this right here tells me, like, this, just the social media aspect of challenging governments and spreading anti-establishment information, or just dangerous information, like I like to call it, it's frightening to these governments. Yes. And now, unlike Saudi Arabia, the U.S. government isn't out here saying, "Look, we're going to give you the death penalty if you spread anything on Twitter." They're much more underhanded in the way they go about suppressing information, whether it be through bully tactics, whether it be through destroying your credibility, or assassinating your character or whatever. They go about it in a much more underhanded way, just like they did to Gary Webb. But this report out of Saudi Arabia saying they're going to literally execute people for spreading information on Twitter. It goes to show, man, this stuff is powerful. These are powerful tools. And yeah, Facebook may be owned by Zuckerberg. Twitter, who knows who owns Twitter? And of course, we all know about Google. But, these tools can be used. And Jake, as you were mentioning, man, we got to take the tools that are available to us now and you turn them back against the powers that be. And I think that's...
can't underscore enough how important it is. I guarantee you listeners out there, if you want to learn how to use technology in a revolutionary way, please, I'm begging you, for the love of God, read Cory Doctorow's Little Brother. It'll get you started, and it'll get you on the right path. I'm not there yet. I'm about to read his For the Win, which is about RPGs and how gaming can even be turned back on itself. Yeah, social media is just the beginning, but in general, we have, like DB said, we have got to get off of our asses and start learning how to use these tools. Technology is the future. We are not going to be, protests are great and everything, and obviously we want to protest wars and whatnot, but we got to get hands on. It's time to get hands on.
Yeah, I mean, this is what I kind of foresee happening to everybody kind of listening is, if the economy drops out, we're going to have a couple choices. One is fight each other, and two is crowd the streets and demand these fools basically take our infrastructure back. And so they're gearing us with all these things like The Walking Dead and all this bullshit to fight each other, and we're all a bunch of zombies and nobody can think for themselves and we're all useless eaters. But these are the people that are the biggest parasites in history. And why would the host body care what the parasite says?
Good point.
Yeah, man. The proletariat's got to start getting their act together, man. I'm not a huge fan of mass movements and things like that, but I think they have their role, and I think that we need a couple mass movements and getting out in the streets with very smart, I guess you could say, tactics or strategies to try to make sure that we can, when things do happen, and I don't know, the way things are playing out right now with Russia, Syria, and everything going on, I mean, it just seems like to be accelerating, and sooner or later the curtain's going to fall, and a lot of people are going to know what's going on, so we got to be ready for that if it happens. It's really important to couple mass movements with really smart tactics, because we all saw what happened in Egypt when they had 30 million people out in the streets, and then there was a military coup, and the military is like, look, we're on your side. We're on the protester side. We're going to do what you guys want. We're going to get rid of these asshole politicians. We're going to get rid of Mubarak and all that stuff. But unfortunately, the Egyptian public, I don't know if it was the fact that they were uninformed or they were tricked or whatever, but the U.S. government owns the Egyptian military. So when they have this military coup in Egypt, we're back in power. I mean, Mubarak's our guy, but the Egyptians are the Egyptian military are our guys as well. You know what I'm saying? So we got to be really smart about how we go about this. Go ahead.
I was just going to say I beg to differ that the military owns the Egyptian military, because as you can see, they're not really helping with this whole situation with ISIS. They're kind of keeping to their borders, securing them. I mean, I really think that they realized the Arab Spring was manufactured there, and that their country was at risk, their identity was at risk, their nation could have been destroyed by this internal strife. They could have been the next Libya, and I think people are catching on. I think people realize the people that are in charge of our country and most of the West don't want countries anymore. They want it all.
Yeah, man. I mean, shit. Exactly, and that's why we got to continue to push back against all this stuff, because the greed of these guys, and there's only several thousand of them that own the whole entire show, right? The greed is limitless, it seems. You know, they'll stop at nothing. They don't care how many people have to starve and how many hundreds of thousands have to die in Syria to build these pipelines or whatever it is they're trying to do. The greed is limitless. We can't underestimate them. We got to be really smart about it. Combine a bunch of different tactics, protesting, technology, all that stuff. Thank you all for tuning in. Catch you next Monday, 5 days a week, Anti-Media Radio. Peace out.